Is this about money?
Yeah.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, if you guys caught my last video, we kind of hit the panic button. We're out of money, we're out of time, we're out of options. Chargers are losing everybody. Well, today we're going to play a little game, all right? Because when you got a problem, I like to think of ways at least a little bit to fix it, even from a fan's perspective. So today we're going to play a little bit of GM in a game I like to call Keep, Trade, Cut, or Restructure, as to try and help this Chargers situation with our salary cap. Now, as a lot of you probably know, especially if you watched my last video, the Chargers, $20 million over the cap, about $23 or $24 million when you count in the draft picks this year as well. It's kind of a sticky situation. It's one that's going to require some tough decisions going forward. Big questions like, are we going to have to cut or trade Keenan Allen? Is Joey Bosa, at risk and on the table to be moved? Some people are even talking about Joey Bosa being traded to the Niners for George Kittle, which, again, I'm not quite sure how I feel about all of that. Either way, we got some money issues that we got to solve today. And I do have a list of names of guys that I think we could tinker around with in order to get under that cap number, which of course was raised this season. It should be raised again next season. I think our problems this season could be isolated if we do things correctly. So as we go along here, make sure you guys throw your thoughts in the comment section below. Maybe even add additional names or options you guys can think of in order to help the Chargers get into a proper cap space situation going into 2023. Now, before we do get started playing GM here, guys, big shout out to Underdog Fantasy. Well, we only got a couple of days left to enjoy NFL football in terms of daily fantasy football. One of my favorite things to do in season. Last chance to do it at the NFL this year. Hit up Underdog Fantasy. Use code Director to match your first deposit up to $100. And remember, we're going to be using it for several other things during the offseason, like baseball and NBA. With that, guys, let's get into this one. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's go out there and play GM. Lights, camera, action. Keep, trade, or restructure. Chargers 2023 edition should be a fun time. Let's go out there and play a little Coupon Tom magic in trying to get under this cap situation. By the way, guys, I know that there's a lot of pressure in terms of who we're bringing back, who we're going to have to cut. Just know that the Chargers will figure this out. We saw the Saints last year, $30 million, maybe even $60 million this year, figure it out. It'll be fine. Be it, there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about our prime cut candidate, J.C. Jackson. I'm just kidding. I really don't think much movement's going to happen in J.C. Jackson, but I needed to include this name anyway because I've been hearing a lot about J.C. Jackson from the Chargers fans, et cetera, these last couple weeks. As a matter of fact, it looks like the Patriots are going after J.C. Jackson in another blockbuster trade. They want him back, according to their fans, which again, I just don't think is going to happen. I needed to include this name once again because I've been hearing a lot of buzz from the fans. Like, well, if we have money problems, let's go ahead and just cut the bust, signing we had last year in JC. Unfortunately, it just doesn't kind of work that way. This isn't the move that the Chargers can make right now that makes any sort of financial sense. If you guys cut JC Jackson this season, what it's going to result in is $20 million in dead cap. 20 million. That's a lot to try and figure out in the future, as well as only saving $3 million in the bank in order to try and work with this year. It just doesn't make a lot of financial sense. Now, I will say that there's been guys saying, well, why don't we trade J.C. Jackson? That's only going to account for, $5 million in dead cap? $12 million saved? That'd be a pretty big dent in that problem. But unfortunately, I just don't think anybody would take that deal. JC suffered a pretty serious injury, one that kind of still puts his 2023 season up in the air. Be it, I do think he'll be fine. I think enough time will have passed by then. And I do think that there's a lot of hope for JC going into the future because he was looking great before injury, starting to fit into that scheme. The coaching was starting to figure out how to use him. He's going to be here to stay a while. We can just hope and pray that this deal works out in the long term. I also do have to note before closing this out, I highly recommend, in not restructuring J.C. Jackson's deal, because again, as much as I want to see him improve, and there's a good chance he could improve, there's also a chance that he may not improve, and restructuring his deal this year could make him a lot harder to cut in the future. So as of right now, we had to include this, I guess, a troll entry in this video. J.C. Jackson, he's a solid keep, just because he just kind of doesn't make sense with the situation right now. Next up, let's talk about the Chargers center in Corey Linsley. Now, spoiler alert, we are not letting go of one of the best centers in football, maybe even the best center in the NFL. But I gotta say, a trade? Maybe a trade? No, not a trade either. Instead, I'm betting on what my eyes are telling me. My eyes have been telling me that Linsley is a huge part of this offense. He is beyond proven. I understand that there's been some injury concerns, but when you look at Corey Linsley on the field versus off the field, how much better does this offense look? How much easier is Justin Herbert's job? Is this man proven that when he's on the field to be the best at his position? I think so. And for a player of his caliber, I think the slight injury concerns is an easy trade-off for me in terms of his talent. I want Corey Linsley on this football team for as long as he wants to be here. And as of right now, he's 31 years old. He's on contract until until 2025. So there's a few years left on there. He'll be a Charger for a minute, and I'm okay in pushing a little bit of money into the future because I don't want Corey Linsley going anywhere. And 31 years old, that's still pretty young for a lineman, by the way. Though that position can age gracefully into the mid-30s. Sometimes, like Corey Peters, a little bit further than that. Either way, I like what I see in Corey Linsley. I still think he's got a lot of traction left on the tires. He's proven as one of the best in the league. And I think the most important detail here is he's the best thing for Justin Herbert on that offensive line. It goes beyond what he does in terms of talent, which is very vast, by the way, but also in terms of what he does in communication and running the offense with Justin Herbert. So I don't want Corey Linsley going anywhere, but I do think moving a little bit of money into the future is a good idea because, again, we're going to pay him eventually anyway. It's not a player that we're looking to cut anytime soon. Let's move a little bit of money. So we're going to go ahead and say restructure with Corey Linsley. I think you can move up to like $6 million with this guy, but I would only move like, let's say $3 million, right? You can take a little bit from several names instead of making one huge name that's hard to deal with in the future. So I like that. Restructure for Corey Linsley. Move a little money off the books. Keep him a Charger for as long as possible. Next up, this next name sucks. I hate to say it, man. It sucks in terms of having to put him on the video because this was one of the most, I guess, I don't know, moving performances I've seen in a long time from any Chargers kicker specifically. That game versus the Denver Broncos, he was playing through an obliterated hamstring. That game was legendary for number 6 out there. And he was a hero last season for sure. But unfortunately for Dustin Hopkins, we discovered a young man by the name of Cameron Dicker, who has just been a revelation at the kicker position. And the Chargers, I would say with that discovery, have kind of found their guy, right? I think the Chargers kicker going forward is going to be Cameron Dicker until he proves us otherwise. And unfortunately for Dustin Hopkins, who just signed a deal last season, Dicker would be a much, much cheaper option going forward. So it makes a lot of sense. So short and simple, I think Dustin Hopkins is a cut for me. It would save $2.28 million if we cut him after June 1st while acquiring $800,000 in dead cap. So there we go. Some money saved already between Corey Linsley, Dustin Hopkins. Let's see what more magic that we can come up with. And this next one, I'm going to say is probably one of the biggest names you're going to see on this list. And it's a name that we've seen so much discussion about between the Chargers fans, even Niners fans at this point, in terms of moving around. His name is Joey Bosa, one of my favorite players in the entire NFL. I understand tensions are high. Joey Bosa has been fooling around in the offseason as far as talking a little bit of smack. Nothing wrong with that, right? Maybe a little bit of hot-headedness, not helping his situation in that wild card game. Either way, however way you slice it, Joey Bosa is one of the best at his position in the entire league. I get it. The Chargers fans, I would say everybody in the NFL, bit of a short memory when it comes to players that miss a significant amount of time, right? All of a sudden, Joey Bosa isn't a top 5, maybe even top 10 pass rusher in the league because he missed a majority of the 2022 season. He still is. And the biggest factor that you can put into this is that he's also young. 28 years old. He's on contract until he's 30 years old. These are prime years in the NFL. To move on from Joey Bosa right now, I think it would be a mistake. I've heard, rumors about the Niners wanting to go after him. Of course, I'm sure he would love to play with his brother and Nick Bosa. But the fact of the matter is the contract just makes more sense for him to stay in Los Angeles, both for the Chargers and him financially as a player. Either way, his cap hit is monstrous, right? It's huge. $31 million. And that likely contributes a lot to the Chargers' problem at cap space this season. It's a big number, right? And it's not going to ease up going forward. But even that being said, I think he's staying. The Chargers are going to have to bite the bullet on this one, but at some point they can afford to push a little bit of this money into the future, even if it creates a absurd, cap hit in the future. Right now, they got to get under the cap, right? And this is a player that's going to stay with the team for a long time, at least through his prime years. It makes more sense to try and figure it out in the future where the Chargers will have a little bit more flexibility, and that's going to be maybe a teaser for another day, right? It does make more sense to move some of this money into what we'll call Herbert's discount years, and that's what I'm referring to as the teaser. I think we got a plan as to how we're going to re-sign Justin Herbert, and it's going to make moves like restructuring Joey Bosa this year make a lot more sense, and we'll cover more of that in another video. And this is going to create a big number, again, spanning in until 2025 in terms of his cap, but it's a move that I think should be made. Bosa's not going anywhere. Just like Corey Linsley, I was saying, is like, I don't want to cut Corey Linsley anytime soon. I want to keep him as long as we can. Same thing with Joey Bosa. So I think it makes sense for a restructure for Joey Bosa. You can move as much as $6 million off this dude. Wow, director, all of a sudden we're only looking $4 million over the cap. That sounds great. I would maybe move a little less money than that. I would say closer to like 6, maybe 10 if it's a sweet spot for the Chargers. But I do think money should be moved into future years for Joey Bosa. That's where I'm at with him. Restructure Joey Bosa. I don't want to hear more ridiculous talks about cuts or trades when it comes to one of the best players in the NFL, and certainly for the Chargers. Next up, let's move into a name that maybe I haven't heard a lot of buzz around, but it's one that kind of did hit my radar this morning when doing some research for this video. His name is Austin Johnson, defensive lineman for the Chargers, who accounts for $9.5 million against the cap this season. Now, Johnson, he's interesting to me. He, without a doubt, was a stud last year. Unfortunately, he did go down with injury. That was the case for a lot of Chargers players that we signed on. Very disappointing in terms of health, but he was a really good player. He was a stud. But despite that, I do have to feel that the Chargers' run defense and those struggles still persisted, right? It wasn't something that was a do-all, save-all, solve-all in terms of that problem, which was, of course, probably the main focus for Brandon Staley in bringing in guys like Austin Johnson. I do believe this is probably a scheme issue. There is evidence to believe that a Vic Fangio system, as good as it is versus quarterbacks like a Patrick Mahomes and these big playability dudes, it does suffer versus the run. Either way, it begs the question to me. Can the Chargers replace Johnson maybe with an in-house player, specifically what they're trying to do in terms of run defense? Because I've loved what I've seen from Braden Fayoko, who is a free agent, be it a very cheap one to re-sign. From Tito, who I saw a lot of good things from last year before going down with injury. I think a move here might be possible. Now, it wouldn't be a cut. Let's get that off the table right now. We're not cutting Austin Johnson. That wouldn't make any fiscal sense. He'd hit for $6 million in dead cap while only saving $3 million. That's not going to happen. I would much rather keep Austin Johnson at that point. But a trade, and this time it's not a troll, a trade, that kind of works. That kind of works. He's a pretty good player, one that I think teams may be willing to look past the injury for in order to acquire. That, a trade scenario, would actually save the Chargers $6.7 million while only hitting for $2.7 million dead cap. That to me makes a lot more sense. Still, it's not my favorite scenario, but it's one that I would kind of be willing to work with if a trade partner can be found. So in this situation, I would say trade. $6.7 million or $6.75 million is what you would be saving. 2.7 is what you would be taking on dead cap. And I would expect an Austin Johnson to return a modest 5th or 6th round pick in terms of draft capital. Hey, it's a little something and it helps the books out a little bit. Next up, another popular name I've been hearing a lot about during this offseason, last offseason, the offseason before that. His name is Kenneth Murray. K9 Kenneth Murray. And again, it's a name I've been hearing thrown around a lot from the fans these past couple of weeks because, again, we got money problems. We got players that maybe aren't living up to their first round hype. It kind of makes sense. Ipso facto, maybe we go ahead and cut Kenneth Murray. Right now, the Chargers, again, shock, surprise, we don't have any money. Murray is on the last year of his rookie deal, right? Which certainly comes at a value in terms of what he brings to the position. Sure, he's not great. Maybe not as bad as he was the year previous, but this last year he wasn't spectacular. Certainly not first-round talent. But if we decided to cut him, we'd save, what, $2 million? And then what do we do, right? What do we do at linebacker? I feel like what he's bringing in terms of value and in terms of being the last, year on his contract, I think it makes more sense to keep him on the roster. Let him continue to see if there's something in there as we continue to build this system and this scheme. If not, then maybe we elect not to pick up his fifth-year option to move on from Kenneth Murray. But I would say the only way, and again, trying to play both sides of the fence here a little bit, the only way I'm cool with letting go of Kenneth Murray to save a measly $2 million is if it's in like a required step to keep Drue Tranquill, if that makes sense, because I really want to keep Drue Tranquill. I love Kenneth Murray. I hope he stays with the team, but if there's a move that helps the Drue Tranquill situation out, then maybe I'll entertain it. But for right now, I'm going to say keep. We should keep Kenneth Murray. Next up, probably the most popular name in terms of cuts for the Chargers fans, it's Matt Feiler. Kind of crazy to think about what could happen in just 1 year, right? Because Feiler was an absolute stud in 2021. He looked like a slam dunk offseason acquisition. He stepped onto the field and played like a Pro Bowler his first year. And then what happens in 2022? Well, he kind of falls off a cliff. And I think a lot of this has to do with not having Rashawn Slater on the left side, does it not? I feel like, again, how good was he? Which is kind of harsh, but you think about it, Matt Feiler was sandwiched between two Pro Bowlers in Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley. Maybe that made his job a lot easier, and without Rashawn Slater, I think some of those things that he was cut from the Steelers from, or at least not re-signed, kind of came to light. And now the Chargers situation at left guard, you got to take a look at it. We got a young stud ready to step into that position in Jamari Sawyer. That position is going to be firmly held down by Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley playing side by side of him. I don't know. I feel like this is the most predictable move of the offseason. I think Matt Feiler is almost a for sure cut at this point. So we're going to go ahead and label him as such. This is a cut. $6.5 million is what would be saved, with $2 million in dead cap to carry over for the rest of the season there. So not too bad. I think Matt Feiler, that's a nice chunk of change right there, and it's one that makes a lot of sense with the Chargers player ready to step into the position. Next up, we have another player that I've heard a lot of buzz about. It's not one that I particularly agree with, but we're going to talk about it in this video because I have heard plenty of buzz about it. And again, it kind of kills me to have Gerald Everett on this list, who accounts for $8.2 million against the books. And again, these are tough times. We're trying to get under the cap, right? Even so, Everett to me is the perfect tight end for the Chargers right now, right? Not elite, but he was pretty good. He was pretty solid last season, definitely to what we expected, right? I think if you go back and look at some of my prediction videos for Gerald Everett, we're not too far off the mark. He had a career season with 555 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did what the Chargers needed him to do. And keeping Everett means the position would be solid into this season as well. Again, not elite, but definitely solid, while maybe at the same time also developing young talent. Let's say the Chargers do go out there and draft a tight end in the early, maybe mid-rounds. It would give a year for that player to kind of settle into the position, which, again, tight end takes a little bit of time to develop unless it's a very special talent. That and Gerald Everett only has 1 season left on his contract, so not much of a long-term commitment, so it makes a lot of sense to keep him. However, I do have to say, this is kind of similar to the other situation we're looking at with Austin Johnson, right? I do think that if we can find a trade partner, I might have to entertain that idea, right? Because a cut saves $4 million while also forfeiting another $4 million to dead cap. That to me is just kind of like, you win some, you lose some. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. But a trade, that does save a little bit more money while also gaining a little bit of draft capital. So if the Chargers' eyes... How do I say this? If the Chargers are firmly looking at a guy, let's say like Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid in the draft, then I maybe entertain this option in terms of a trade, as there's only, year 1 studs in my radar going to be Mayer and Kincaid. If the Chargers go after one of those guys, then maybe I entertain a trade, but I don't know if a trade partner would be that likely in either way. So we're going to say, for the sake of variety in this video, we're going to label him a trade. Gaining $5.75 million back while only acquiring $2.5 million in dead cap. I would only expect a return of a 5th round pick at the most, but at the same time, it's a move that helps you out a couple of different ways. Next up, let's talk about Votto. For some reason, I've heard Votto's name thrown around a lot. Why? Are we going to trade him? Are we going to cut him? Nope. This is going to be a short and simple one, okay? We would save $7 million by cutting Votto, but at what cost, right? He's a stud. Are we going to find another cornerback at the same, value as a Votto on this team? No, absolutely not. And we don't know what's going to go on with J.C. Jackson in the future anyway. So short and simple, cutting Davis is not worth it. He's a keep. I had to throw that name in there because I have been hearing his name thrown out there just a little bit by the Chargers fans. All right, next up. Another name that probably not on the radar of a lot of Chargers fans in terms of, movement or cutting or trading. It's going to be Sebastian Joseph Day, who accounts for $9 million against the cap in 2023. Now, think a lot about what we talked about with Austin Johnson a moment ago, right? Austin Johnson, he's a stud. Sebastian Joseph Day, he's also been a great addition to this line. But like Austin Johnson, he didn't really help our run D all that much, right? He kind of did, but kind of didn't. But again, I still think this is kind of scheme, at fault in terms of that not working out. Still, if I had to choose a guy to be our anchor on this line this year, I would still choose Sebastian Joseph Day. You complement him with guys like Tito or Fayoko if we can get him back. I'm not feeling too bad about if we can adjust our system to fit these guys versus the run. So cutting him, in my opinion, that's off the table. I don't want to get rid of Sebastian Joseph Day, which also doesn't make much fiscal sense, by the way. Cutting him, we would lose a lot more money than we save. However, I have included his name on this list for the simple fact that I feel like we can move a little money off the books to next year because, again, I do want to see him with the team for a while. And be it not a huge restructure, every dollar counts at this point. So we're going to restructure Sebastian Joseph Day, saving $2.7 million that we can spread over the next couple of years. Again, not a lot of money, but every dollar counts at this point. Next up, we got to talk about another blockbuster name, okay? And again, it's one that I understand the conversations around it, and it's definitely one that you got to include when it comes to the Chargers offseason. It's Khalil Mack, who is hitting for a whopping $27.4 million this season. Again, I've seen this name a lot online, but also by other teams' fans. There's a lot of other teams hoping that we want to move on from Khalil Mack because Khalil Mack commands a huge number of cap space this year. And for the Chargers, cutting him would save $18 million. Again, that almost single-handedly solves our cap situation for this year. But we would also be hit with a hefty dead cap of $9 million, mind you, if we decided to do that. But still, you got to do what you got to do sometimes, right? But let's say the Chargers do that. What do we do at edge? What happens now? We're sitting here with a huge hole at edge. We just let go one of the best of all time to play the position. Even with the money saved, there's no way that we would find talent even close to Khalil Mack out there to fill that position. Now, I think that the Joey Bosa Khalil Mack duo, that is still something worth investing into this year. And it didn't really get to show what it was all about this last year, right? That injury really threw off the Chargers' plans in terms of that pass rush. And, I still think that dude was one of the best in the NFL. It deserves a chance to shine. If anything, I think the Chargers, let's go ahead and play middle ground here for a second. If the Chargers want to move on from Khalil Mack, right, don't do it this year, right? Let's give the Joey Bosa Khalil Mack, duo a chance, as well as pushing it off to a date that makes a little bit more sense, right? I could maybe entertain a cut next season. That would only account for, $4.5 million in dead cap while saving a whopping $23.2 million. And at that point, he's going to be, 33, 34? I think it makes more sense for the future. So for me right now in this video, we're going to say keep. He's our keep guy. And it's definitely one that I think, again, a lot of us saw the potential in that duo going into the season. We didn't get to see it. Now we want to move on. No, we got to give it a little bit of time. I want to see that duo in action. I think next season could shock a lot of folks as to how effective that is. Finally, we could not do a keep trade cut video without including probably the biggest name in terms of, chatter around the NFL, not just Chargers fans anymore. We're going to talk a little bit about number 13, Slayer Keenan Allen. The most talked about Charger on the roster right now, without a doubt. Now, we're already starting to see several players from other teams try to recruit him. I think I've seen Falcons teams. I've seen Green Bay players, I should say. I've seen a lot of guys out there saying, hey, Keenan Allen, come play for our team, come play for our team. Honestly, dudes, at this point, if you guys watched my last video, this won't come as to any surprise. I can't rule out the possibility. I honestly, genuinely can't rule out the possibility of the Chargers moving on from Keenan Allen, be it a trade or a cut. It's a possibility. Be it a dumb one, in my opinion, still a possibility. But this is our situation, right? Cutting, or preferably, let's say, trading Keenan Allen would almost single-handedly solve our money problems in 2023. It's a reality. He's being paid a lot of money, $21.7 million against the cap. But at what cost, right? At what cost of moving on from Keenan Allen? The Chargers would surely have to, go draft a wide receiver in 2023 in the early rounds, perhaps even the first round. Kind of ties your hands in what you can do there, even though a lot of us want to see a wide receiver regardless of what happens to Keenan Allen. That player would not come close to replicating Keenan Allen's talent on the field. And it's a move that I think in the end kind of hurts Justin Herbert as well. If we want to do this, let's do it the right way. I get that it makes a lot of sense financially, and I do understand that it could happen. It's definitely a possibility. But me personally, I can't do it. We need to keep Keenan on this team at least one more season. So I'll tell you what, just like Khalil Mack, I'll split the difference. Let's do what we have to do to keep Keenan Allen this year, okay? Keep him a Charger in 2023 by all costs, all right? If we wait to cut or trade him next season, right, if we wait until 2024, his dead cap is only $2.7 million instead of $7 million this season, right? Next season, it would save us a whopping $23 million, which with very little dead cap, in order to move on from Keenan. That I can understand just a little bit more, right? That I get as part of a transition phase, right? We go get a guy out there this season to try and help build the Chargers wide receiver core for the future while keeping Keenan Allen with Justin Herbert one more year where I think he's really going to need him. I don't see much of a dip in talent for Keenan Allen. I think he's still going to be great with this team. I understand wanting to move on from Keenan, just not right now, okay? Keep Keenan Allen a Charger for 2023. Let's see what happens in the future. If they still want to move on from him in 2024, it would make a lot more financial sense. So Keenan Allen, we're going to label him as a keep for me. So here's my bottom line, guys. I wanted to show you guys a chart here real quick before we get into the closing arguments here, all right? So here is the Chargers salary cap situation via overthecap.com. And I've gone ahead and inserted some of these moves that we went through in the video to show you guys that the cap space situation can be solved while keeping Keenan Allen, okay? As you guys will see right here, we have $3.4 million in cap space. That also helps us out in terms of paying our rookies. Not too bad. We did a lot of things that we talked about in this video. I think we saved, what, like $7 million from Joey Bosa by restructuring some money there. We restructured Corey Linsley for a little amount there as well, not too shabby. We restructured Sebastian Joseph Day. We cut Matt Filer. We cut DeAndre Hopkins. And then we cut just some of these guys that you're going to replace anyway in the offseason via like your practice squad and stuff like that. Just a couple little moves. Because we have to remember, like, these little numbers add up down here too, right? You got a lot of these rookies that aren't going to move, but you got David Moa, who's, zero dead cap, $870,000 in cap savings. You pair a couple of these guys up, you're already looking at what, $1.6 million. Just a couple of things that you can do down here. And I think some guys that made sense to me were Tyreek Maddox-Williams, Michael Jackett, maybe even a Larry Roundtree if we decide to go after another running back in the draft, Keelan Doss. There are a little bit of moves to get under the cap, and then afterwards you can start figuring out what to do in terms of bringing in some more talent for the practice squad. If you wanted to keep additional talent, though, in-house, you are going to have to entertain other things that we talked about, like let's say an Austin Johnson trade, maybe a deeper restructure for Joey Bosa if you're going to go after guys like, let's say, Drew Tranquill or Morgan Fox as free agents, as you'll see here on the right. Either way, I wanted to highlight that it is possible. It's possible to get under the cap, make that deadline, and try and figure things out as we go throughout the rest of the offseason in terms of other talent. It is possible. So to close this video out, in the end, there are reasons for exercising specific strategies, okay? The Chargers could work their magic with restructures and cuts while keeping Keenan Allen and also getting under the cap. They could also justify cutting Keenan Allen. We don't know what's going on in the Chargers offices right now. They could do that in order to gain financial freedom to make other moves, right? Bigger free agency moves, maybe start trying to transition in younger talent. So my question for you guys in the comments who've made it this far in the video, which pill are you taking, right? I offer you first the red pill. This is a heavily restructured Joey Bosa while also keeping Keenan Allen. This causes us to pay a hefty toll in the future, but we get to do what we got to do this season. Then I present the blue pill. We have to cut Keenan Allen, but maybe we get to sign some bigger free agents, start transitioning into the future with younger players. Red pill, blue pill, you guys let me know what you're thinking. Me, as a matter of fact, give me the red pill, which is the restructure Joey Bosa, keep Keenan Allen. I do believe that this team is hitting a transition period, okay? New wide receivers, younger weapons, younger players, the painful parting of veteran talent. I think that's happening, but let it be a transition, right? Sign and draft guys this year to ease them into their roles next season. We'll figure out the money like we always do along the way, but let's let it be a process. And keep in mind, the NFL cap's going to continue to increase. Players can be cut with much more forgiving dead cap penalties next season. So I say let's do what we got to do this year and let the money situation help itself out by buying time for another year. We'll have more flexibility to fix our money problems in the years going forward. That's just my 2 cents. So what's your guys' 2 cents? Let me know in the comment section below. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Hit us up with a like and sub on your way out if you did enjoy this content. Make sure to go check out Underdog Fantasy if you want to get in on the action. Last possible chance to get in on the action for NFL football until September. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. And as always, Volt up and stay frosty. Joey Bosa to the Niners. Nah, that's hilarious.